we were about to land on the moon, even though we were very poor, and the students that I attended with were about in the same boat. We were all just pretty desperate small farm families. Everybody worked hard, everybody knew everybody, and everybody certainly looked alike, everybody acted alike. You attended the same churches. The churches were way bigger than the school, but I didn't really fit in. From the time I was probably about the second or third grade, I was really interested in space. My teachers told me on a regular basis that was not what I needed to focus on. The purpose of that school was to turn out young farmers. And there's nothing wrong with that, but it's not necessarily what everybody wants to do. When I was in the 5th grade, we had kind of a show and tell day. What are you going to be when you grow up? The other 2 boys that were in my class, same grade level, one wanted to work at the farmer's co-op, another one wanted to just inherit the father's farm. And I told my class that since we were within about 4 months of landing on the moon, I was going to work for NASA. Believe it or not, that garnered me my one and only spanking in school. My teacher had said she'd had enough. And I was not an honorable person. I was belligerent, and because of that, I got a spanking. I went home that day. I was pretty sensitive. I was a good student. I worked really hard. I tried really hard. And I told my mom through tears that when I grew up, I was going to have a job that had vacation days. And on those days, I would go and visit schools. Because, you see, I kind of thought all schools were kind of like mine. And so I was going to visit those schools, and I was going to tell them all the cool stuff that I wanted to know. I've worked hard to keep that promise all these years to my mom. What excites you about your work? And what's the best part of your job? Going and visiting schools. Every day. This past year I visited 127 different schools, over 13,000 students and teachers I worked with. I have a portable planetarium. I do some star parties where I carry telescopes, because growing up I also wanted to look in a telescope because I thought Jupiter had to be about this big, and I also wanted to visit a planetarium. And I was grown before I got to experience those things. How can our country engage with educators in rural and isolated regions to support them in STEM? Well, I can tell you a little more about what I'm doing. Believe it or not, I am booked all the way through this coming school year and into the fall of 2019. You see, almost none of the schools pay anything for my service. That was part of the deal when I was setting it up. I've got to be able to go for free. And I know you as educators are facing some real challenges. My wife is a teacher. My daughter teaches at a very high poverty school. It's not necessarily rural, but it is in the small community of Shelbyville, Tennessee, which is what I would claim to be my hometown today, even though the little country community that I was telling you about growing up in doesn't exist anymore, but it was called Flat Creek. When I go to schools, I really take the time to point out that rural students have a lot of things going for them, particularly if you're going to go in a STEM career. Most of them have been around machinery. Most of them work. Most of them have been around chemicals. They helped plant. They've driven equipment. They've learned how equipment works. They have learned how to take care of things, whether it be equipment or animals. There are so many positives that often is overlooked because of the fact that you just see the rural part. I cannot tell you how many times in college, knowing how something worked paid off in the long run for me. When my colleagues were trying to learn something out of the book, I thought, well, this makes sense, or it doesn't make sense, because I know how things work. And certainly, I did not have the experience of many of the students that I was in college with, but I had a solid background in the way things operate. So there are a lot of positives to talk about. And if you're going to a rural area for the first time, I think that's where you need to start from. You need to start from the good. And to be honest with you, I had the greatest job anybody could have at NASA. I was a science liaison. I worked with people who landed things on Mars, drove cars on Mars. I worked with the shuttle program, put things into orbit. I had a great time. And you don't believe me. I know you're not going to believe me. But spending time with young people and seeing them get excited is better than putting things into space. It really is. I know, you're thinking about it. I do it every day. Something's got to be better. Not in my eyes. And so when I retired in 2015, I started a foundation. The Battelle Corporation has helped me do some outreach to some rural schools that are very far from here. I have never gotten up one day that I didn't think, wow, I am a lucky guy, because who knows, I may be meeting the next Gene Kranz, the person who saved Apollo 13. He was a flight director. Or I may be teaching the first person to step on Mars. How does your job make a difference in the world? I cannot tell you the joy that I receive when I get emails from teachers, emails from students. That's really cool. Just a few months ago, I received a job application. A young man wanted to be an astronomer, and he wanted to be my assistant. And it was pretty cute. But I'll tell you one of the coolest, unique places I've been, unique experiences. There is a county here in Tennessee that I visit every year. It's called Warren County. It's about an hour and 20 minutes from here. And I was at a school, and this was the third class of the day, and I was about to have a lunch break. I guess all the kids were going to have a lunch break. I can hold one class in my planetarium at a time. And so there was this class. I looked at my watch. I saw it was time for us to end. I was asking a few questions. I don't have a lot of Q&A time, but I was answering a few questions, and I wasn't under quite as much pressure because I knew that they were headed to lunch. I was getting a break, so I didn't have to just stand them up and run them out the door of the planetarium. And so I'd asked a few questions and had lots of hands, and the teacher said, okay, well, we've got to go. And I said, okay, guys, well, we've got to go. It was great having you. It's an honor. You know, everything I talk about you can find in the library, you can find online, and I hope that you will be excited, because I really don't want you to be an astronomer or an astronaut. I want you to be science literate. And I had this one young man, and they had stood up, and he said, we're not leaving. This is so cool, and we never experienced anything like this. Well, I was a little taken back, and of course, with this one forceful child, and these were either 5th or 6th graders, everybody's nodding along, and I said, well, this is my lunch break. I'm glad to answer some of your questions. Well, they just flopped back down on the floor. You do have to sit on the floor of my planetarium. And the teacher's kind of going, well, we've really got to go. And I said, well, you know, I think you really got to go. And these kids are like, well, we're not leaving. Now, how cool is an experience like that, that children are so hungry to learn they don't leave? Now, to tell you the truth, I'd never seen mutiny before. This young teacher, and I don't know if it was her first year, but she was very young, she became kind of frustrated and she stepped out. We were in the gym and the principal's office is obviously right outside the gym door. And so here comes the teacher and the principal. And I thought, oh, this is about to get ugly. And so I said, guys, you have to leave. You have to leave. But here's the deal I'll make you. I will go with you. And during my lunch break, until it's time for me to leave, and I will answer your questions, and we can talk about careers. I mean, anything you want to do, anything you want to talk about, I'll be with you for about 20 more minutes. Now, as far as the setting's concerned, Warren County, Tennessee, it's just the rolling hills. They're noted for their shrubbery. Is that a real unique place? Absolutely not. Was that a really unique experience? Absolutely. That is the only time I've had students refuse. I've had students beg to come back. And I always let the teachers know that if you have someone that is very passionate about this, if they want to come back to another session when I'm doing them during the day, I have no problem with that. But I've had one supervisor after another tell me, Billy, your passion drives not only you, but all the people around you to achieve and do just a little bit better. I am one of the luckiest people you will ever see. Thank you so much for listening. I wish that I could bring you here and give you an evening under the stars. The invitation's always open here in Tennessee.